was the summer of 2014, and for my son's bar mitzvah present, just like many Jewish parents, we wanted him to bond with the Holy Land. Oh, it worked perhaps too well. My husband had stayed back at the hotel, and our friends, my son and I, had just stopped in a pharmacy.
Run to the bomb shelter, sweetie, please hurry. I didn't hear the sirens at first, but the Israelis did. They're used to hearing these things. We ran to the back of the storeroom. It was a 12-foot by 24-foot windowless bomb shelter. My heart's pounding. Boom! Boom! I hear and feel the percussion of the exploding bombs. I'm trying not to get sick. I look at my 13-year-old son and I think I'll never forgive myself if something happens to him.
That's an excerpt from a speech I gave to the Orange County Jewish Bar Association. It was the first, but not the last time we had to run to a bomb shelter. Our adventure and my transformation is also the subject of my book, Blasted from Complacency, A Journey from Terror to Transformation in Israel. There is no chapter in a parenting book on what to do when a war starts and you're on a family vacation. Think touring extraordinary and sacred sites mixed with cowering in bomb shelters. I'm still trying to get over the Jewish guilt of taking my son to war for his bar mitzvah present. The impact of being human targets helped me understand the plight of Israelis living like this, and it also made me want to work on peace. How Israel is often described on the news is not what I'd seen with my own eyes. And I felt Palestinian parents also preferred their children playing safely in their backyards. The missiles exploded just near enough to blow apart my world as I knew it, forever changing me. And you'd never recognize my life today with what it was like then. I believe I found my life's purpose. Hello, I'm Penny ST, and I'm the host of Peace with Penny. We're very excited that in today's episode, we'll begin a two-part series on a new solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Peace with Penny is not a political show, but we're always willing to speak about peace from many different directions. Between the contentious Israeli elections, the continued violence, and the two-state solution that seems dead, it may be hard to believe that there will ever be peace between Jewish Israelis and Palestinians. Yet, week after week on Peace with Penny, we show you that there are many people who work on peace between the two peoples every day. We just don't hear about it on the news. In the next weeks, we'll be speaking about something else you haven't heard about. If the two-state solution has not been realized since the 1930s, isn't it time to propose something else? There's been more than enough time to study what has worked in other countries. And the good news is there are a number of academicians who think they have the answer. The proposals are based on federation models. In a couple of our last episodes of the year of Peace with Penny, we'll be exploring two of the proposals that some believe is the answer to resolve this entrenched conflict. Next year, periodically, we'll discuss others. The solutions are some configuration of a federation, like we have in the United States, Canada, Switzerland, or 25 other countries. It has worked for these countries, and they believe it can work for this small, viciously contested country in the Middle East. Of course, in this land, not everyone agrees on the exact formula that will work, but they've been willing to discuss their models. The first example that we'll discuss is called the Abrahamic movement. It has been said that if religion is part of the problem of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, it must be part of the solution. This grassroots movement believes that we are the children of Abraham, both literally and in spirit. They believe that Abraham, Ibrahim, is the powerful unifying symbol that Jews, Christians, and Muslims can come together and agree upon. Today, we have the honor of speaking with Yoel Oz, who is the co-founder of the Abrahamic movement and the author of Abrahamic Federation, a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He served as an Orthodox rabbi and educator in the Washington, D.C. metro area for 5 years. He studied at Cornell and Yeshiva universities in Yeshivat HaMivtar and Yeshivat Rabbeinu Yitzchak Elchanan. Welcome, Yoel.
Hi, Penny. Great to be with you.
Good to have you. Yoel,
And good
how
to be
would
with and good and say hi to all of your viewers and listeners. It's great to meet all of you.
Yoel, how would you describe the Abrahamic movement?
The Abrahamic movement was founded by myself, another Israeli named Phil Saunders, and two Palestinians. And we basically have been promoting this idea of an Abrahamic Federation. We are an educational as well as political movement to some degree, where we promote the idea that a solution to the conflict should work in terms of structure, as a hybrid of something like the United States model, where you would have states like New York and New Jersey. Instead, you would have Israel and Palestine, or the European Union model of like France and Germany. And obviously, there are many other countries in the European Union, obviously, many other states in the United States as well. But the same kind of idea, and where we would be unified by a common symbol and spiritual heritage, which I've been writing and talking about this for about 10 years now. But after the Abraham Accords were coined and signed in 2020, it sort of confirmed that the Abrahamic symbolism and imagery and idea and word resonate for Jews and Muslims as well as Christians throughout the Middle East. So the idea of basically a federal model with Abraham as its unifying symbol.
Yeah, one of the things that I really liked is it seemed to honor both sides. And, that's obviously essential to get something to work. What made
Right.
you want to work on peace?
Wow. So that's an interesting question. So I think I started out pretty much on the right wing side of the Israeli political spectrum, but over time, I think the real watershed event that changed me was when I was 15 and Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated.
Mm.
And that was sort of when I said this had gone too far. I still have problems with the two-state solution and separation and the idea of dividing the land or uprooting Jewish communities in what's the biblical heartland as a religious Jew, places like Hebron, Bethlehem, Beit El, Shiloh. These all have very deep meaning for us. This is literally the land that was, talked about in the Bible, where the forefathers and foremothers lived and dwelled. So it was very important to me. But I also, when I came from the United States, and the United States is a multicultural, diverse society where we have equal rights and respect for, or supposed to at least have respect for all people, and that everyone is entitled to certain inalienable rights. And so this uh, the, the 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 notion that, okay, at the end of the day, no one is. I don't believe anyone is going anywhere. I don't think that they're not going to push us into the sea, and we're not going to be driving them to Jordan. And that at the end of the
Right.
day, we are destined to live together in this land, and that we have to figure out a way to make it work. And so I came up with this proposal. Again, I grew up in New York. My grandparents lived near New Jersey, near the George Washington Bridge. For people who know the New York geography, we used to go to New Jersey all the time. And it
When
was
did you move to Israel?
10 years ago, in 2012. But my
And how
father
old
was
were you?
Israeli. I was 31 at the time, but my father was Israeli Yemenite actually, and I spent a lot of time here as a child in the Tel Aviv area. And then after high school, I studied in yeshiva for 2 years in the in Gush Etzion, which is in the territories. So I've lived there. I know what the mentality is. I know what the geography is. I know how people think. And Gush Etzion is a very interesting place because there are
Right.
a lot of American olim,
Mm-hmm.
and they've sort of begun to build more of a
Olim, which
coexistence.
is what?
Jewish immigrants to Israel,
I
what we
just
call make
I know, but not everybody does. So
right,
um,
right. So going to making we call it making aliyah. Go when we immigrate to Israel, we're going up. Aliyah means to go up.
mhm.
So a lot of Jewish immigrants, Israel, American and English speaking Jewish immigrants live primarily in Efrat, as well as in other places like Gush Etzion is a group of settlements in southern Jerusalem hills near between Bethlehem and Hebron. And so they've always sort of been like, they're technically settlers, but they've never had like direct violent clashes with the Palestinians. There have been some significant Palestinian terror attacks on the roads and at shopping centers and at bus stops, and so that automatically creates a certain feeling of fear and being threatened on the part of the people who live in those areas.
Mhm.
But in contrast to, let's say, some of the more radical settlements in Samaria, you don't have the phenomenon of Jewish settlers retaliating or attacking Palestinians. I mean, I'm sure that there are cases, um, but they're more isolated if they are, and the leadership, specifically of a couple of the religious leadership, has strongly condemned any kind of violence on Israeli, on Jewish part. I'm sure you can
Sorry.
find exceptions,
Right.
but that's also just going back to the Abrahamic movement,
Mhm.
being that this is the Holy Land, being especially with regards to the settlements and Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, being a very religious area. I really believe that religion has to be part of the solution, and that we need to look at sort of models like Martin Luther King Jr., who led the civil rights movement, which was spiritually based. He was a reverend. It was based on many of the ideals of the prophets, and I think that it provides the ability to heal as well. The healing nature of religion can be divisive, but it can also provide healing.
What prompted you to start this? When did you start it?
So I wrote my first article in 2013. It was originally called "The Commonwealth of Abrahamic States." The idea that I had was sort of like the British Commonwealth of Nations, loose association of states, and I liked the idea of the term Commonwealth. That it literally is the shared heritage and shared property wealth of these two peoples. I thought it was a good um, intellectual exercise. The problem was that in America we have the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Commonwealth of Virginia. I think Pennsylvania is also a Commonwealth. It's another word for a state. Um, but the problem is that nobody in the Middle East, in Israel, knew what a Commonwealth was, and there
right.
was no direct translation of it into Hebrew or Arabic. Um, and I wrote in that article that I thought at the time that the word union or federation or confederation were political associations that were too strong. I definitely didn't feel like union. We were there, but then I started exploring confederation and federation, and I wrote my first book, Abrahamic Confederation, which um, I thought really as a model was more appropriate, that we're much more like the European Union than the United States. We have different languages, we have different identities, different religions, and that we're really, it's not like in the United States where, with New York and New Jersey, there is very little ethnic differences. Yes, there are differences between the blue states and the red states, and there was a civil war, and um, but all of these things are, the idea of having a greater political union is something that the United States is grounded upon. But I don't think we're there yet. But that doesn't mean that we can't have a broad association and work together. Found what I found though was that the same when you want to make a proposal, you need to make it simple enough, I think, for a third grader, an 8-year-old, to be able to understand it. And the immediate question was,
Oh,
what is
that's
a
why you
confederation?
came to me to help present it, right?
Yes. Well, no,
I figured it was the lowest common denominator, but
no, 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 no.
we'll get into the details soon. But I did there before we get there.
Yes.
There's a little clip that we have. It's a little for an American audience. It might be a little bit difficult to watch because you have to read subtitles, but it's a real display of the complications in this area that are significant and why you really need both sides addressed. So if you could just explain what we'll be seeing.
So we did a video called "From Hebron to Jaffa." First half is in the biblical city of Hebron, where Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Jacob and their wives were buried in the cave of Machpelah, and it's revered by both Jews and Muslims. And But it is currently divided in half. Only Jews are only allowed on one side of the complex, and Muslims are only allowed on the other side of the complex, with the exception of about 10 days a year for each side. And each side complains when when they're blocked from using the complex. So it's sort of like, when both sides don't like it, that means that you've reached an agreement. They can agree on something.
Can I ask, because
Yeah, sure.
that's such a foreign concept to us here, why is that? I mean, why can't people just go to both sides if it's important to both sides?
So it originates from 1994. There was a Jewish terrorist attack by a person by the name of Dr. Baruch Goldstein, who went into the Muslim side and opened fire, killing 29
Oy.
um, Arabs, Arab Muslims, Palestinians. And since then, they have basically tried to keep the two sides as far apart from each other as possible. The in After the Oslo Accords, there was a special when they created the Palestinian Authority. They had a special sub section on Hebron, leaving 80% of the city in Palestinian control, and 20% of the city, including the area of the old city and Keva Machpelah, under Israeli security control. So there are parts of the Israeli side where Palestinians literally are not allowed to go.
Yeah.
Seeing in this video that my friend Ziad and I were literally at the line. His You don't see the military soldier there, but he said he can't come over to my side of the barrier, and I can't go over to his side of the barrier. We were allowed to talk to each other, but we had to we had to be separated. And you have this notion of at least in America where there's freedom of worship in any place you go, but like if you're a tourist and you want to go to the Muslim side of the Cave of Machpelah, they'll literally ask you, "Are you Jewish?" And if you say yes, they'll say, "Well, you're not allowed to come onto this side of the complex." And the same goes the other way. The soldiers often they don't sometimes they don't apply it so strictly, and like if you're not wearing a kippah or you're wearing a baseball hat and you're an American and you're a tourist, they'll just let you through and they won't make a big deal out of it. But sometimes the soldiers, what they're usually trying to do is keep the peace, and the way that they see keeping the easiest way for them to keep the peace is by keeping everybody as separate and far away from each other as possible. We contend that separation is not how you make peace. Separation is a divorce.
Right.
But we're a family, and we're a family we have a feud. And I think I compare it that the settlement should be more like an inheritance dispute agreement. And a family, we each have our own families, and but every once in a while families get together, they have a barbecue, they have a reunion, they talk to each other, they sit, they eat, they hug, even after a very long time of fighting, funerals, people come together sometimes, celebrations, as well. It even is in the Bible. Isaac and Ishmael, Abraham's sons, Abraham separates them. They go their separate directions. But when he dies, in the Torah, it says that they came together at the end to bury Abraham together in the city of Hebron. So there is this notion of reconciliation, and that we are, at the end of the day, brothers and cousins.
So let me just play the clip.
There's something about being in a place of holiness where people have prayed for centuries, places like this, that we share with our Muslim brothers and sisters. And they also pray, and we all pray to the same God of Abraham. We pray in different ways, we pray in different rooms, but one day this will be opened up again, and we will be able to pray in our way to God, and they will be able to pray in their way to God.
זה בית של אלוהים, ויש חוקים של האדם, שיוצר עשור לבוא לבוא, ועשור לבוא לבוא, עשור תעמוד ככה, וזה באמת כואב לנו.
זה צריך להיות מקום משותף שבו אנחנו בונים את ההבנה ואת השותפות ביחד.
זה בית של אברהם, אבינו, אבא של כולם.
כן, אם אנחנו יכולים לפתור את חברון, אנחנו יכולים לפתור את הכל.
זה הרגשה באמת נחמדת, קודם כל, שאברהם אבינו הוא לא רוצה שיהיה הפרדה בין הילדים שלו, להפך הוא רוצה שנהיה ביחד בעזרת השם. رفقة رضي الله عنها زوجة النبي إسحاق، زوجة إسحاق عليه السلام.
ציון קבר שרה אימנו, the grave of our mother Sarah.
مقرب جدا لله سبحانه وتعالى. سيدنا إبراهيم عليه السلام، سيدنا إبراهيم الخليل. الخليل هو خليل يعني الصديق، صاحب.
Yaffo is mentioned in the Bible in the book of Jonah. This is where he set off on his trip to Nineveh. And today it's really a place where you really see the ancient port meeting the modern First Hebrew city of Tel Aviv.
אכפת לנו באמת שכל הארץ יחיו בו בשלום, בו ביפו כולם גרים, יהודים, נוצרים, מוסלמים, כולם גרים כשכנים ואחד שומר על השני בצורה מיוחדת, בצורה טובה מאוד לכולם.
איך אתה מרגיש שפלסטינים, ערבים, אינם יכולים לבוא לכאן בקלות וצריכים אישור מהצבא?
من حق أطفالنا الفلسطينيين يعيشوا بكرم، يتنقلوا بين المدن، يجوا على البحر، يشوفوا البحر، يعيشوا حياة طبيعية.
We want everyone to be able to see the sea, to breathe the sea, to swim in the sea. There's a blessing, a special Jewish blessing, when you see the Mediterranean Sea. And just as we wish to pray together in Hebron, we wish to enjoy God's nature and beauty here at the ancient port city of Jaffa. In this noisy parking lot, which is just a few meters from Ma'arat HaMachpelah, the cave of Machpelah, my dream would be to have, on the first day of the lunar month, prayer sessions with Muslims saying the Shahada, Christians saying the Lord's Prayer, Jews saying Shema Yisrael, and at the end blowing the shofar.
מה שאני רואה בעיניים שלי באמת העם הפלסטיני שהוא מחפש זכויות גם, זכויות שלו לחיות בכבוד.
And we would do this every month until the walls between people started to come down. And the sad part is we would have to do it in the parking lot because there's no other place where we can come together.
So, are there any other comments you'd like to make?
It was a beautiful thing. And, you know, for Israelis, Hebron is a part of Israel. For Palestinians, Jaffa is a part of Palestine. And, you know, ultimately, I believe this is one land between the river and the sea, and there should be freedom of movement. And we should each be able to go and visit, and they should be able to, you know, you often hear, I said this, you know, see the sea. This is something you often hear from Palestinians. And for Jews to be able to go to visit the, you know, the resting places of the forefathers and foremothers is extremely moving and powerful. So it should be, you know, in an ideal situation, everything should be open.
Right.
That's my feeling, yeah.
So now let's discuss the details of the Abrahamic movement proposal. You say it's a 3-2-1 federation plan. Can you please explain what that means?
Okay, yes. So 3-2-1 is basically the idea is that certain things in the federation, there would be three of them. We'll see three flags, three specific seats of government, three levels of government. Some things would be two, meaning like there would be two official languages, Hebrew and Arabic, and certain things would be like one. The one would be, we would have one open shared economy, one currency. So basically, the idea is to build a political structure that works, and to be able to utilize political symbols that also work. Let's begin. So in some ways, for some people, the structure and the details are really the most important. But for a lot of people, it's really the symbols that when you think of countries, when you think of states, the first thing you think of is their flags. So I don't foresee Israel changing its flag. I don't see the Palestinians changing their flag, but I do think that we can add a third flag, that would be a unifier. I'm not much of a graphic artist. I think you would need to get people um, to design
Mm-hmm.
a flag. My vision is, sort of similar to our logo, which is a tent, a blue field with stars, the sand of the sea below, sort of like the prophet, the prophecy that was given to Abraham, that his children would be like the sand of the earth and the stars of the sky, and that his tent was the tent that was open to all and welcoming. And that's an important part of our shared Abrahamic uh, heritage. Both believe strongly in welcoming guests, strangers. This is also, a major pilgrimage destination and tourist destination, and
Mm-hmm.
that welcoming and open to all who come as they come is something that is common in both Jewish and Arab societies.
Mm-hmm. And that they
Okay,
would
so
have
similar.
anthems.
So the other symbols, like if you go to an Olympics game, and they have the medal ceremony. So they'll raise the flag of the gold, silver, and bronze winners. And what will they do? They'll play their anthems. So along with the symbol of the visual symbol, there's also an auditory symbol that people associate with states. I presume Israel will maintain Hatikvah, the hope,
Mm-hmm.
as its national anthem. I'm less familiar with the Palestinian anthems, but I presume that they will have their own unique, particular anthem. And then I think that the Abrahamic Federation as a whole should also have a general anthem. So there would be three anthems.
And police forces. That seems like that'd be something that'd be sensitive. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So I think this is now where we're getting more into the structure. I don't foresee the state of Israel giving up on the uh, Israeli police force. I see in the areas under full Palestinian control, Palestinian security and Palestinian police acting. But I think in those areas, specifically in the West Bank and Judea and Samaria, that are probably going to be under some kind of joint jurisdiction. Um, for example, there's a major highway that highway number 60 that goes north and south uh, between Samaria and Judea. My proposal is that instead of just having Israeli army patrolling, that it would be a joint professional police patrol, and that each patrol car would have an Israeli and a Palestinian in it, and that they would be um, given the task of providing security for Israelis, for Palestinians, and that everybody should be able to live without fear of traveling, and that law and order and safety and security, no matter what happens, has to be provided for all. So I think that there would be three security forces: security and police.
Do
Security is
you
protection, and police is also in law enforcement.
do you as, assume that the Joint Federation police would their authority would take precedence over the other two if stuff happened, or did you go that
Not
far?
necessarily. I haven't written about that, but that's the tricky part of all of this. What happens at that third level, and who, at the end of the day, is in control of what? I think that we should try to keep each side as independent as possible, but in areas where we need to cooperate and share, that we should try to do it in as equal and equitable manner, and fair manner as we can. And since Israelis and Palestinians in the West Bank and Judea and Samaria, um, they really live with each other. My vision is that that region would look more like the Galilee. The Galilee, it's also not perfect. The Galilee or the Negev in the north and in the south, which are, it's not that things are perfect in the Galilee, but Jews and Arabs live among each other, more openly, and there's less hostility between them. And so my vision is that Judea and Samaria would turn more into those kinds of environments.
So you propose three seats of government. Israel has the Knesset, Palestinian parliament, based on Majlis, I believe, in East Jerusalem, and the Abrahamic Federation Council. And we'll go over each of them. So the easiest one is the current Knesset. Can you describe for viewers just a brief, what is that for anybody who's not familiar with the Knesset?
Okay, so Israel has a parliamentary political system. There are 120 members of Knesset, and there are about 12, 13 parties, at times political parties. About 80% are Jewish, 20% are Arab. Some are religious, some are right wing, some are secular, some are left wing. And Israeli politics is very lively. And the Knesset debates and speeches are often very, how shall we put it, chaotic, um, and contentious, and it's a vibrant democracy. Freedom of
It's
speech,
it's
freedom of
it's
speech.
it's like that here now. So
Yeah.
so too, unfortunately.
There aren't many limits on freedom of speech, and people say what's on their mind.
Yeah.
um, uh, even or especially when someone else is expressing, uh, uh, trying to speak their views. So I really believe that change is incremental, and that you have to build on what already exists. So the building is there, the structure is there. I don't see it going anywhere. I don't see radical changes being made, to the Knesset. I would like to see, and a lot of us in the federal movements would like to see more regional government. At the moment, it's the Knesset. It sort of represents only one only one electoral district. We don't have things divided like the Tel Aviv area or the Jerusalem area or the Negev or the Galilee, Haifa. It's all under one central government. Um, but I foresee that this would remain. And to make it very clear, because we're going to talk about a Palestinian
Mhm.
parliament as well, that Arab Israelis, should they decide to retain Israeli citizenship, they will have the absolute right to have that.
Mhm.
Um, they will continue to be represented in the Knesset. Um, but
Okay.
we're going to talk about the Palestinian parliament.
Hmm.
Um, the what's now called the Palestinian Authority. It has its base of operations, administrative center in Ramallah, but Jerusalem is very important to them symbolically as well. Now, I think that there needs to be a Palestinian parliament, as we'll talk a little bit later. Palestine and Israel will each get to decide who can be a citizen of each state. And if the Palestinians choose um, to retain or obtain Palestinian citizenship, they would vote in the Palestinian parliament and not necessarily in the Israeli parliament. I think that
Mhm.
we will have a joint federation citizenship, but at the national levels, I think that you'll have to make a choice. You can't vote in both the Israeli parliament and the Palestinian parliament. You have to choose. And if Arab Israelis choose Palestinian citizenship and they choose to vote in the Palestinian parliament, that will be their free choice. There will be equal
So,
civil rights for everybody, but in terms of parliaments, and in this sense, this is more like a confederation. The Palestinians would vote in their own parliament. I've avoided using the word capital, but really, a capital is the seat of government. If they want to have their parliament in East Jerusalem, it doesn't. I don't think that that should be a major issue. If that's where they choose to meet, then that becomes their capital. The contentious part of Jerusalem is really the old city and what's called the Holy Basin, and that's where I think we should view it as a federal jurisdiction. And the next slide
um,
is the
but right before we get there, what's a
third body.
moduli?
Majlis is
Modulus.
a legislative council.
And is that what the PA has today?
So there are a few different organs in the Palestinian Authority. Some of them are part of the PLO, and some of them are part of the PA. They have two councils, actually. One is the Palestinian National Council, and one is the Palestinian Legislative Council. The truth of the matter is that neither one is particularly active.
Hmm.
Um, and for Palestine to be a fully functioning democracy, one of the things that they will have to develop is a parliament. It doesn't necessarily have to exactly mirror the Israeli form of government. I don't think that it necessarily should look exactly like the Knesset. It could have as many seats as they choose, and they divide the powers and the structure, to what fits them best. But I think that in any situation, even if they have a president and they have a prime minister, their president, Israel's president is more of a figurehead. Their president has a lot more power, and the prime minister has less power than the Israeli prime minister. But there's also a need for a legislature in any society, and if we assume that Palestine will be a democracy, they will need to have a parliament as well.
So now the Abrahamic Federation Council, what is that all about?
Okay, so that's at the third level. I propose three levels of government: local government, which is the municipal level. Each city, each region has its own government, and there's the national levels of government, which would be represented in the Knesset and in the Palestinian Majlis. Um, I think there needs to be a third level at the federal level, which is a coordinating body. I think that the location um, that uh, that would be, very symbolic would be on the Mount of Olives, overlooking the walls of the old city of Jerusalem. It's a place that is representative of peace. The olive tree is the symbol of peace. I think that the I've further developed this since I wrote my book. I don't see a council necessarily as being above in authority of the national parliaments. I see it more as horizontal, somewhat similar to the United Nations. So I propose a third body that will be a coordinating body that would have limited powers, and that for the most part, Israel and Palestine would each be independent. But the third body would be where they share responsibility in areas like water, transportation, infrastructure, aspects of the economy, things that are of a joint nature. I think that there are other models. I wrote about a council. Lately, I've been thinking of a commission, um, which is how the European Union really originally got started. It was called the European Economic Commission, the EEC. Um, and this is I don't believe that politics is going to disappear or that we're going to be creating a utopia. I think
Mhm.
that politics is going to continue. There's always going to be battles and struggles over power and control. But I'd rather it be done in a political framework than in a military framework where people are shooting at each other. I would much rather people be yelling at each other, even if they're debating vigorously. It should be done in a non-violent and peaceful,
Now, if there are disagreements, as there will be,
of course.
would you say that the Federation Council would have a overriding power over the other two, or you haven't
So
gone that far?
this is something that I think needs to be negotiated. I don't propose that I have all of the answers on this one. I personally think that the national levels should retain most of the power. That's also one of the reasons why I'm moving away lately from council and towards a commission. But it's something that's going to have to be negotiated. And we're going to have to come to some kind of agreement on who gets to control what.
Language is always uh, a big issue there because in general, you have the Jewish Israelis speaking Hebrew. The Palestinian citizens of Israel often speak Hebrew, but seem to prefer to speak Arabic. And then, of course, English is kind of thrown in there to to help out. You want to talk about all that?
Sure. So I think that, this is one of the ways in which you see that really language is kind of where you divide. You see that people are different nations, different peoples. Um, it's true that Arab Israelis speak Hebrew, but their mother tongues, their native language is Arabic. Israelis, I would say, would need to be required to study Arabic as well. That I believe that both populations need to be fluent in both languages, and I would agree also that Palestinians um, who don't speak Hebrew that they also would need to be taught Hebrew, the ones who are in the territories now. And this is an international economy and a globalized world, and English is the dominant language as the international language. So I think that really, in addition to Hebrew and Arabic, we need to be educating, and I think we already are educating people in English. And English is sometimes the default language when people don't speak either Hebrew or Arabic. Usually, people speak two languages. The people who speak all three languages are, I only speak Hebrew and English. And one of my partners only speaks Arabic and English, and the other one only speaks Hebrew and Arabic. So we often like go around, one person sort of translating for the other. But and we always seem to figure out how to make it work, which is kind of interesting. Like when you want to make it work, it works. But I think that both languages really need to be recognized and be official in the federation.
So when it comes to presidents or ministers between Israelis and Palestinians, how does that work?
Okay, so again, this is where I think we should leave it somewhat similar to where it is. I don't see there being one president of the federation, for example. I don't think that having an election over, is it going to be a Palestinian or is it going to be an Israeli, or is it going to be a right wing or a left wing, or I see the federation as sort of having less authority. I think that I think the council or the commission should have a secretary general and a chairperson, one from each from Israel and one from Palestine. But at the national level, Israel, the president of Israel would remain the head of state. The prime minister would remain the head of government, as it is now. Israel would remain the Jewish state of Israel. The Arab state of Palestine would have, again, it's up to Palestinians to decide how they want to structure themselves. But currently, they also have a president and a prime minister, but their president is more powerful in terms of executive authority, and the prime minister answers directly to the president. Whereas in Israel, the Knesset elects the president, and his roles are mostly symbolic. And the prime minister is elected by the people.
And at the UN, can you
So
describe what you're proposing?
right. So in this way, it's more like a confederation. Just like France and Germany and the United Kingdom. Well, UK is no longer part of the European Union, but even when it was, they all maintained independent representation at the United Nations. Um, Whereas in a federation like the United States, New York, New Jersey, Maryland, Virginia, they don't get seats at the United Nations. I do think Israel and Palestine each would maintain their independent representation at the UN, but that the Federation should have an observer status similar to what the European Union has currently as well. So again, so I talk about this. People ask, is this one state? Is this two states? I describe this as sort of one and a half. Between one and two, there's one and a half. It's not. In some ways, this is more like two states. But in terms of how we function, it would be, at the local government level, or the national government level, it would be more like this one and a half. But at the international level, I think each side wants to maintain its own independent representation.
So
Okay.
as far as passports, that's
Okay. So in this way, it's also similar to a confederation and a federation. It's a mix. It's a blended model. The model that I look at is the European Union. So it used to be, before the European Union had the euro and the EU passports, that you had a French passport, you had a German passport, you had a Belgian passport, whatever. And when the European Union then decided to establish one unified passport. So again, like, it's not like you have in the United States, a New York passport or a New Jersey passport. You just have a U.S. Passport. In the EU, it's a little different. You have one EU passport that's issued by its member nations. So in this picture, it's actually it was chosen deliberately. This was the UK passport when the UK was part of the European Union. Um, it was the UK who decided who can have a UK passport. Now that they've left the European Union, it will just be a UK passport. And now for them to travel through the European Union, they may need visas. It may be less easy for them to travel. But when they were in the European Union, they were, fully part of the EU, and that passport was valid for travel anywhere in the EU. I see the Abrahamic Federation, the AF, also having two passports. One AF passport issued with two covers, one issued by the state of Israel and one issued by the state of Palestine.
So, because traveling in today's world between Israel and the territories is such a huge issue, can you talk about the ease of travel under your Abrahamic Federation for Israelis and Palestinians? Will they need passport checks at borders? Will there be borders between the what's considered Israeli areas and Palestinian areas? What are you proposing?
So I think the long-term goal is that it's one land, and that freedom of movement should be um, uh, guaranteed to all people who are citizens of the Abrahamic Federation. Um, I think that it may have to be done gradually. As it currently stands, Arab Israelis, East Jerusalem residents are able to travel wherever they want. A Palestinian Authority residents are limited in their ability to travel to Israel. They need to have special permits. They have to travel at checkpoints. They have to cross at checkpoints. I think that we need to move away from that. I think that the restrictions on movement of Palestinians is one of the things that is causing aspects of the conflict, and that the ultimate goal is within the borders of the federation, there would be boundaries of jurisdiction. Like if you are a New York citizen or resident and you get, pulled over on the New Jersey Turnpike for speeding, you get a ticket in, a New Jersey court. If you want to fight the ticket, you have to go to court in New Jersey. And I think the same would be, in Israel and Palestine. So certain areas would be Palestine, certain areas would be Israel, certain areas would be federal. But freedom of movement should be the ultimate long-term goal.
Okay. Currency.
Okay, so now we're at one. So in this sense, we're actually sort of at this point. The shekel is the legal tender, the currency that's used already within among the Palestinians. Sometimes they'll also use the Jordanian dinar. But I think that having an open market, having one currency where there's free trade between Israelis and Palestinians, there are joint Israeli and Palestinian business ventures. I think that ultimately that will lead towards stability and security. The more that each side is, economically invested in each other, the more they are invested in the stability and prosperity of each other.
And then
This is the citizenship. So this is similar, going back to the passport symbolism. Israel can decide who is an Israeli citizen. And it can, under the law of return, grant citizenship to any Jew in the world. Should they choose to make aliyah, should they choose to immigrate to Israel, they can obtain Israeli citizenship. If Palestinians decide that they want to give Palestinian national citizenship, where the people would vote in a Palestinian parliament, that would be their right as well. And but that together they would have Abrahamic Federation citizenship. So what this does is it maintains Israel at the national level as a democratic Jewish state. It provides Palestinians
Could
with
you explain that a little bit more? Because I think it's not quite clear how that happens, how you're controlling based on population to keep it Israel a Jewish state and the Palestinians a Palestinian state.
right. So the state of Israel itself will continue to function and exist as it does. The the people who choose to become Israeli citizens, or people who are Israeli citizens, or Jews around the world, they can obtain Israeli citizenship. By obtaining Israeli citizenship, they also obtain AF citizenship, similar to the EU citizenship. The same goes for Palestinians. Palestinians, if a Palestinian from abroad, this is one of the ways that you deal with the issue of Palestinian return, similar to the Israeli law of return. If Palestinians want to grant Palestinian citizenship to a Palestinian living abroad, they can have Palestinian citizenship. They would vote in Palestinian national elections, but they would have Abrahamic Federation citizenship. The federal citizenship, like EU citizenship, that would be at a different level, and the state of Israel at that point is able to remain a Jewish state, recognizing equal civil rights to anybody who is part of the AF, anyone who's an AF citizen. But as
Yes,
as a
that's very
Jewish
good.
state, it remains Israel, and Palestine would be an Arab state. So
Mhm.
that's the way it would work.
So you talk about a Bill of Civil Rights. What is that?
Right. So people will often say, okay, we need to have a constitution. I think it's going to be difficult to write a constitution for a lot of reasons. I think that a constitution is going to be challenged by religious people on the Jewish and the Muslim side, who were uncomfortable with constitutions other than the Quran and the Torah. And I also think that a constitution, personally, that solidifies government functions that are dysfunctional is not necessarily a good thing. I think Israel has what's called a series of basic laws. They function as quasi constitution. I think that what's really necessary are civil rights, and that it needs to be a universal Bill of Civil Rights, freedom of speech, freedom of rights in terms of how we're treated by legal authorities, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, all of the things that, those of us in the Western world sort of take for granted are things that are not taken for granted here. And by having equal civil rights, but voting rights in separate parliaments, that's how you maintain a democratic Jewish state. You don't end up in this situation where Israel is called an apartheid state, because everybody would have equal civil
Right,
rights.
right. And obviously, freedom of religion is at the
Freedom of
top there.
religion, exactly.
So,
Well,
so
religion is a tricky question, but yes,
I mean, freedom to choose, right?
yes. Yeah, in Israel and the Holy Land in general, it's a tricky topic,
Oh,
but
that's true. That's true.
yeah, yeah,
When I think of it, all the different denominations,
yeah, it gets a
and
little tricky.
deciding whether or not who decides what is a Jew, for instance,
Yeah,
with
all
the
of these
more
things
religious it
are
gets.
difficult.
Yeah, it could
Yeah.
get pretty ugly.
I think that
Okay.
religion has to be, my opinion is that it has to be handled.
Yes, of
Religion,
course.
I think you're not going to I don't think it's not like it's in the United States where you can have strict separation of religion and state.
Mhm.
Because religion is so interwoven into the Holy Land, has such religious significance to Jews, Christians, and Muslims all around the world. It has to be done sensitively, and I think in the Abrahamic model, that provides that umbrella for doing that in a respectful and peaceful manner.
There's quite a number of benefits to your proposal. The first off, the Abrahamic movement begins with the belief that through Abraham, Jews, Muslims, and Christians are family. So that goes a long way toward working together, I'd say.
Right. We're already related. Not like we're taking people who are completely foreigners to one another. We have similar family faith traditions. We all have descent and a connection to this land in a very deep and rooted manner. Children of Isaac and the children of Ishmael are cousins, and we're family in so many ways. We resemble each other in so many ways. Family resemblance is striking. We're different families,
Mhm.
just like, your cousins don't look exactly like you, but sometimes you'll meet a cousin and you'll be like, wow, you're just like great grandpa.
Right, right,
And
right.
I think the symbolic piece, and the brotherly, sisterly, cousinly
Right.
relationship is something that should be encouraged and developed.
The fact that both Jewish, Israeli, and Palestinian independence is addressed is extremely significant. You want to talk a
Right.
little bit about that?
So this is sort of like that 1, 2, 1.5. So in this way, we're more like two. We're both independent states. We govern ourselves. We aren't under the rule of another nation, and that independence. I think for Israel, you will still identify as an Israeli. You will still identify with the symbols of the state of Israel. Yes, there will be this overarching third level, and we have to talk about, how much authority it has, and I think that that's going to be, a topic, just like you see this in the European Union. The UK
Hmm.
felt that the EU was overstepping its sovereignty, its national independence, and so I assume you're going to have the same thing with Israel and Palestine with the AF, and that's normal. I think that that's okay, but I think that being independent is still important. I think in the same
Okay.
sense that we're both independent and also interdependent.
Right. The practical benefits as well as spiritual benefits, we've pretty much discussed. Jerusalem is a seat of government for both Israelis and Palestinians, yet the Old City and the Holy Basin is protected by a special status. Obviously, Jerusalem is always an extremely sensitive subject, and it seems like you've protected from all angles as best you can that status, that importance, that
Yeah, West
sensitivity.
West Jerusalem is already predominantly Jewish, and East Jerusalem is predominantly Palestinian.
Mhm.
Where you place your parliament, that's up to you. The Knesset's not moving; the building is built; it's
Right,
there.
right.
The old city having special status, I think, is important, because that's really where the holy sites are, and
Mhm.
more sensitive.
We've also talked about the freedom of movement for all, but we didn't, you mentioned the settlements won't be uprooted, but did you want to say anything more about that?
Yes. So that's, for a very long time, the settlements and the settlers have been viewed as a major obstacle towards peace. But in this model, Jews will be free to live legally, meaning where they're legally allowed to build throughout the land. Palestinians would also be free as residents to live inside of Israel, but not necessarily as citizens. And settlement, we learned from the Gaza disengagement, that when you uproot settlements, often what happens is that extremist organizations like Hamas come in and end up taking power. The settlements are strategically important. They are important in terms of cohesion of Israeli society. The very, with Gaza, it was, 10,000 settlers in Israel. We're talking about 500,000, 500,000 settlers plus the people in East Jerusalem. It's a major obstacle to remove settlements, and what this does is it says that wherever Jews are in Israel, this is Israel. Wherever Palestinians are, this is Palestine.
I'm not quite clear because, of course, the whole West Bank versus Judea and Samaria segment of land, I know we're talking about the same land, but you just call it differently depending on whether or not you're Jewish or Palestinian. But
Right.
who, in your opinion, would be in charge of that
So I
land?
think that the current division into Area A, which is under full Palestinian security and civil control, Area B, which is joint control and Palestinian civil control, Israel control security on the outside, and then Area C, which is under full Israeli control. I think that really areas B and C will be opened more to Palestinians. The Palestinians will have freedom to travel throughout the West Bank. As it is now, it's sort of difficult to travel between the major Palestinian cities. I think that many of those areas would be federal lands, but if we take a city like Efrat, Efrat itself will be Israel, and the police inside of Efrat would be Israeli police. But in the neighboring town so I also, where my partner lives in the village of Husan, which is across the street from the Haredi settlement of Beitar Illit. Husan would be Palestine, Beitar Illit would be Israel, and the road that divides them would be federal.
So as clear as mud as you I'm just joking that it's
So
complicated. It's complicated. It's always complicated there.
So when I was a teacher, I was a rabbi in Washington, D.C. I lived
Mm,
downtown Washington, D.C., and I taught in a Jewish high school in the Maryland suburbs. What I
mm.
would do is I would cross the Potomac River into Virginia. I would take the highway in Virginia. Then I'd cross the Potomac River again back into Maryland. And then I would come back and I would do this when I would go home. And so within one day, I was in three jurisdictions twice
Yeah.
or not twice, constantly going between one and the other. And so, you don't really think about it, when you're going from, Washington to Virginia to Maryland. Like you have a sign that says, "Welcome to Virginia" or "Welcome to Maryland." But,
Right.
I don't,
But the difference is the obvious difference is that you don't have the animosity between the two peoples,
now, but
the
if we look at
fights and so on. So
France and Germany were slaughtering each other in the millions for centuries. And now they're the two backbones of the EU. Virginia and Maryland
yeah,
were on opposite sides of the Civil War.
right.
So it's not like it's impossible.
Right,
Uh,
right. No, no, and I don't mean to imply that it is. It's just in today's viewpoint.
it's hard to imagine today.
Yeah, there's a way to go. There
Yeah,
was a ways to
yeah.
go. So,
But this
I
is
mean,
where
from your
maybe
mouth to God's ears, right?
this is where I think that this approach is not pie in the sky. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
realistic. I think it reduces tensions. I don't think it's going to solve everything right away,
Mm-hmm.
but I do think that it will reduce tensions dramatically and it will create goodwill. Like I
Mm-hmm.
said, we're going to fight. Politics is a
Mm-hmm.
reality, especially
Right.
when you people are divided on ethnic lines or on
Mm-hmm.
religious or nationalistic or all kinds of lines, and that's fine and legitimate. You work that
Mm-hmm.
out in the political sphere, but I don't foresee that there aren't going to ever be problems. I'm sure
Sure,
there will
sure,
be problems.
sure. Sure,
I'm sure
sure.
there will be crises,
Sure.
but better that it should be dealt with, in the media than in clashes in the streets.
Absolutely. Jerusalem is a seat of government education for the other to improve understanding. What is the concept behind that?
I do think that it is necessary, especially in Jerusalem, for Israelis to understand Muslim sensitivities, for Muslims to understand Jewish sensitivities, both of them to understand why Christianity feels such a strong connection to the holy city. I think that that kind of inter-religious
Hmm.
is beneficial. It's not always easy,
Hmm.
but it's something that I think to learn how to respect the other requires education and learning about the other.
I love the fact that you're emphasizing that the Federation Police would know both Arabic and Hebrew because that's such a communication amongst the two peoples is so vital.
Absolutely, because as it stands now, you have 19-year-old soldiers manning checkpoints who don't speak Hebrew. Their fingers are on the trigger. A Palestinian, if they look the wrong way, they could get shot. The Israeli soldier knows a few words like, stop, move over to the right, get out of the car, open your
Yeah,
trunk, and that's about it. And if the Palestinian doesn't really speak Hebrew, that's like a recipe for conflict, and it's something that can easily be fixed. People can learn languages. It doesn't happen
right,
overnight, but we shouldn't be afraid of each other's languages.
right.
No.
And so, with all this, you have a comprehensive resolution of the conflict, which is amen to that. But of course, there are challenges. And so we need to talk about those, the psychological and practical challenges to be overcome. There are plenty of those.
Right. So there's a tremendous amount of distrust, hatred, pain,
Fear,
trauma,
fear.
fear and trauma
Mhm.
that have been going on for a very, very long time. I think that the religious component, again, provides some healing,
Mhm.
that we're all children of the same God, that we all revere this land, that we all come from the same family tree. I think that these are big, big things to overcome some of the psychological hurdles. The practical hurdles is, I think the is politics.
Mhm.
Inertia is probably the strongest force in politics. People think that they can just keep the status quo going, and that they don't have to change, and people are always afraid of change.
Mhm.
And the fear of change is because the fear of the unknown, and people, they are more comfortable with the devil they know than the devil that they don't know, and they're always
Right.
afraid that change is going to make things worse. So my argument is it's already pretty bad.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that we're going to make it perfect, but I do think we can make it better. And I think in the long run, this will decrease violence and decrease the risk of to people's lives on both sides. It ensures security for everybody within the land, and it provides the whole land to be one unit that everybody can benefit. So I think there's a lot of the fear of change. A lot of this sounds new and sounds different and kind of scary. And there's always going to be opposition, but I think that it checks off a lot of the right boxes.
What
Okay, so
about
over the fear of the other.
what about the opportunity to help control the violence and terror attacks? What about your plans addressing
So
those?
I don't think we're going to be able to 100% uproot all violence and all extremism. I think that there are always going to be extremists. My goal, or I think, is to try to isolate them as much as possible. That if you can get 95% of the people instead of 85% of the people to be nonviolent, that remaining 15-20%, you get that down to like 5%.
Mhm.
You can control that. You can quash that, and each side will have the incentive, because they're all interdependent, to keep that extremism from coming off top. The
Mm-hmm.
moderates are strengthened. The more you strengthen the moderates, the more you strengthen the people who want peace, who want prosperity, who want security,
Mm-hmm.
the harder time it's going to be for the extremists to sell what they're selling. The longer you have mistrust and fear and hatred and cycles of violence, that's what feeds the extremists. The more that things are okay and you have relations and trust, the more that you take away the oxygen
Right.
from the extremists to grow.
Right. And of course, when you have such complex new systems, just understanding what you're saying is an
Right.
issue. And you have to first understand what you're saying, and then you have to go about implementing it
And
uh,
selling it.
and selling it. It's getting acceptance is you got a few things on your plate.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
you have linebackers' shoulders, I take it.
I'm there. I'm a determined realist. That's what I call myself. I'm
Okay.
very realistic, or a pragmatic idealist. Like,
Uh-huh.
I have certain visions, but how you get there, you have to be very realistic about the political and psychological and spiritual obstacles that are in your path. But you have to be determined to overcome and know
Yeah.
where you want to get to.
Yeah. Well, I surely wish you luck on those. I wanted to close with you do have different occasions where you bring folks together, and we had some photos. One of your events is what you call the Abrahamic Sukkot Shalom in Husan, which is obviously very a symbolic location for such an event. You want to talk about these photos?
Yeah, this was pretty amazing. So the our my Palestinian partner, who you saw in the video, he and his village built a sukkah for the Israelis, because Palestinians love to host and they love to invite people in. So they actually, instead of us building a sukkah and inviting them into our sukkah, they built one for us. I
Could
did
you
the
explain what a sukkah is to people who aren't Jewish?
Yeah, so Sukkot is the third of the major holidays in the holiday season of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. It comes after 5 days after Yom Kippur, and it's the commandment is to leave your homes and to live in a temporary structure with a roof that is made from usually like bamboo or leaves or something that's a temporary roof. It's not a permanent dwelling. And we eat in the sukkah for 7 days, and some people even sleep in the sukkah. We have our meals in the sukkah. It's a joy. We get out. We're supposed to leave our comfortable surroundings and go into a temporary dwelling place.
Hmm.
So in this instance, the Palestinians, they had a location and they built the sukkah for us. I supervised all of the kashrut, as you can see. I
Uh,
super that we made
which
kosher
is making
food.
it kosher, quite an
Uh,
effort.
yeah, so we wanted to have Palestinian ethnic food, but we wanted it all to be kosher. So we bought special pots. You can see I went and I did all the ritual things of making sure that the pots were kosher, all the food was kosher. I supervised everything, and it was great, because nothing brings people together like food.
Yeah.
And
But it's
once
such
you
a
sat down,
such a beautiful effort on
it was a
everyone's
really
part.
special it was a really special event. It was really, really something very, if only we could do these kinds of things more and more, and we could do
Mhm.
them everywhere. It just means getting some kosher food together. I think and I think religious Jews would like to meet Palestinians, but food is often, and Palestinians, Muslims have their own laws of halal, so they respect
Mhm.
that we have kosher laws. They understand, they also don't eat certain things, and it has to be prepared in a certain way. So most Muslims are very traditional and very respectful of Jews who who observe their traditions.
Okay, we better move on because it's making me hungry. And the Federal Forum is an organization where many of the federal proposals are discussed. You want to talk about this meeting?
Yeah, so all of us who have been involved in different federal solutions have been meeting for over a year now, and been discussing and debating and presenting and commenting on different ideas for federal ways to resolve the conflict. And the Abrahamic movement has sort of placed itself kind of in the middle of the different groups that it's a hybrid really of federation and confederation, and also that we're addressing the religious and spiritual component, the symbolism that I think is critical for building trust and building goodwill. The top picture is, a lot of us from the
Mm-hmm.
members of the Federal Forum, and the picture below,
Right.
that's my Israeli partner on the left, and one of my Palestinian partners who you saw in the video,
Yeah,
Ziad Sabatin,
this is
in the
Phil,
center.
Phil
Phil
Saunders
Saunders. Phil
from
Saunders.
Challenge
Yes.
and
Ziad
Ziad
Sabatin.
Sabatine
Yes.
and
And
yourself.
myself.
Terrific. And here you are with your book. So you
Yes.
want to tell
So my book
people
is
where they can get your book?
available on Amazon. It's pretty short. It's like 50 pages or so. It's meant to be read. You can sit down and read it in one or two sittings. And I divided it into a few parts, one dealing specifically with political structure, one dealing with political symbolism, and then a third part dealing with how to handle specific issues. The goal is to get people. The topic that I describe is I call it a paradigm called Abrahamic federalism. And the
Okay.
goal is really to get people to open their minds to a new way of looking at the conflict, putting on new glasses, viewing things through different lenses.
Awesome. I want to thank you for your time today, Yoel, and for working so hard to try and propose a plan that honors both sides and can move this conflict forward. Next, we'll be meeting with Emmanuel Shehaff, who serves as co-chair of the Federation Movement, a proponent of another federation model. The Federation movement promotes an equitable and modern federal state of Israel on the territory of the land of Israel between the Jordan River and the sea, not including the Gaza Strip. All inhabitants of the state will be equal citizens whose rights will be secured by a federal constitution. They'll be able to exercise their religious and cultural uniqueness in 30 cantons. The regional government in each canton will reflect the composition of the local population by which it was elected and will fulfill all the duties of government, not including national defense, foreign affairs, and other cross-cantonal duties which are within the responsibility of the federal government in Jerusalem. Emmanuel was born in Germany and immigrated to Israel in 1972. He worked for 14 years in the office of the Prime Minister in Tel Aviv, serving in various positions at home and abroad. He's been a member and worked for the Labor Party since the early 1990s. He studied aeronautical engineering at the Technion, the Israel Institute of Technology, and has a bachelor's and master's of science and an MBA. Since 2014, Emmanuel has promoted a federation as a realistic approach to resolve the conflict with the Palestinians in the land of Israel. We hope you'll join us. And for now, as always, we hope that someday everyone will live in peace, shalom, and salam.